This is Bleav in Buckeyes. I'm Bryant with All-American quarterback Chekwa. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. Chim, the College Football Playoff Committee, they dropped their first rankings for the season, for the playoffs. That's emerging the 12-team playoffs. Obviously, our Buckeyes, I don't want to say obviously, but we got that number one spot. I don't know. It feels deserved. We deserve it, right?
Yeah, it feels deserved. I think I would have been okay with a number 2. just based on, where we are, the time of the year. It's a little bit of extra motivation to finish strong. But
Right.
if I would have to make the decision, I would say that Ohio State has proven to be the number 1 team so far. I think obviously Indiana, I think they've earned a right to be at number 1 as well. But if you're watching both teams, I would give personally, and obviously I watch more Ohio State than I do Indiana, so I'm obviously going to lean a little bit more Ohio State in that regard. I will say this though, I actually watched them go through all the teams, and I was excited to see when Iowa popped up in the rankings, because they weren't ranked in the AP poll. And I've been saying, like, some of these Big Ten teams, because they didn't start off the season with any expectations, aren't really getting ranked. But seeing Iowa there, who I thought, they've been playing some solid ball, some consistent football. They haven't won all their games. They lost to Indiana by 5 points. But I was happy to see them. So I felt like the committee, when it came to the Big Ten, did an okay job getting some of the teams that are deserving to at least be ranked in that playoff ranking.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Like, because you look at the back end of it as far as the Big Ten teams, you get USC in there with 2 losses, Iowa in there with 2 losses, Michigan in there with 2 losses, Washington in there with 2 losses. And, like I said, I think if these guys hit your schedule, something, you don't take that game lightly by any means. But as far as the Big Ten teams that are currently in the dance, obviously we got Ohio State 1, Indiana 2. Also, Oregon is up there at the 9 spot, rounding out the Big Ten teams that's currently in the Big Dance. Any surprises? Texas A&M 8-0. They're in the big bad SEC, number 1 strength of schedule, but they did not. Obviously they still got the 2 Big Ten teams ahead of them. If that's surprising to you, even this does air on ESPN. So
I won't say it's surprising. I think if nothing changed and you switch A&M with Crimson Tide logo, I think they end up being number 1. Honestly, that's just. I mean, it's just human nature to look at to A&M with a little bit more preciseness to determine whether or not they're that team. And I thought the committee's response, I forget his name, but they asked him questions about. I think Mac Rose or something. They asked him questions about, why A&M. You got this new strength of schedule metric, which is really kind of an SEC metric, right? To boost the SEC teams, right? And based on strength of schedule, Texas A&M likely is at the top. So why do they end up getting ranked 3? And they pretty much said, look, we watched the film. We looked at the stats. Both Ohio State and Indiana are both top 5 teams. So basically they said Ohio State and Indiana are close. And then there's a little bit of a gap. And then there's number 3, because Texas A&M, who has a really high-powered offense, isn't up there in terms of defense. Well, all statistics are not up there in terms of defense. And I thought that was a good response. That made me actually feel pretty good about the process, that we're not getting over-indexed towards, like, strength of schedule, right? Because you only can play who's on your schedule, right? There's no, I can't say, oh man, Florida State's not good this year. Give me that other team over there. Like, you can only play who's on your schedule, and you got to really measure teams based on who they're playing against. And so I thought that was a good response, but it is interesting because after Texas A&M, you have Alabama, Georgia, and Ole Miss, which feels right.
Yeah,
it feels right. But Bama lost to Florida State, right? And you have to imagine that if there was another team that lost to an unranked team, actually you don't even have to imagine. Look at the ACC teams.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any ACC team in the top 10, right?
No, they're not. No ACC team in the top 13.
Yeah.
You got Virginia sitting at the 14th spot. Then we go Louisville, and then you go Georgia Tech at 17 and Miami at 18. So they all kind of grouped together right there at the back end of the teams.
Yeah, and so Miami at 18. Miami is a team that has the same record as Notre Dame, and they beat Notre Dame.
They
Now,
beat Notre Dame.
if it's me, again, if it's me, I'm watching Notre Dame play. I'm watching Miami play. Notre Dame, it seems like they are coming together, starting to improve. And Miami, it feels like
They're
they're
unraveling.
falling apart. Yeah, they're
You're right.
unraveling a little bit. But that could also change. That could, they can have the players only meeting, get things back on the right track.
No, but that's a good point though, because I mean, when you look at this, you want to give some type of respect for head-to-head matchups, and it's just like if you can't do that, if we can't agree that you should give some type of respect to head-to-head matchups, then throw out the whole regular season. Like little guys submit their roster, and then you look at the roster like, oh, we know these 4 or 5 star guys, we know this guy from here. This would be the playoff committee. Like you gotta try to earn it on the field. And Miami beat Notre Dame. And when you look at things, that I think that's literally like the only matchup where you see it was a head-to-head matchup. The other team won, and they're still behind them, right? Because their record's still the same, right? We know obviously Miami lost to Louisville, who's a good team. They're in his rankings. They're where I just said they was at. They're at the 15th spot. They lose to SMU, who obviously SMU is not having the strongest of seasons, but they made the playoffs last year, right? So there's some talent in the building somewhere, right? But you played Notre Dame and you win. We both got 2 losses. Now obviously Notre Dame losses to you, and then they also lose to Texas A&M, who are now talking about is in contention for being the number 1 team in the nation because they're still undefeated. But I don't know. If you're Miami, you got to feel a little bit slighted just due to you're sitting in your conference versus a Notre Dame who doesn't have a conference.
Right. Right. Now, I'll give some credit to Notre Dame. Notre Dame is the only team that goes conference to conference to conference every week to play everybody, right? So a lot of times when we start looking at, okay, who's better than who, you really could just take Notre Dame's schedule and see who they matched up against, and then and determine which conference actually is the most competitive. But I think overall, man, it's hard to get this right. If I did the ranking myself, there'd be a few in there where I'd be like, I'm not sure this was right, right? So I think it does. Outside of the ACC getting, I feel like the short end of the stick. I think overall it does set things up for the last few games to play out and see where everything shakes up. I'm holding strong to the fact that I think Bama gets another loss this year, most likely versus Oklahoma, just because Bama, like I said, they don't stop the run very well, and they don't run the ball very well, right? So margin of error to me, when you're not playing your best game, you have a couple of drops. The receivers drop a lot of balls too, so you have a couple of drops, and you play a team like Oklahoma who does stop the run, who can effectively run the ball. And there's some other issues they have, right? I think they lose a game like that really to Auburn. I know Auburn doesn't have a coach anymore, so that may change. But I think a few of those SEC, I think there's still going to be some shuffling in the SEC. So we'll see how that plays out. Ohio State being number 1, we all know what the game to watch is. It's the game, team up north, being able to finish that, and then potentially a Big Ten champion versus the number 2 team in Indiana. So yeah, still a lot of exciting football left.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting that the committee had basically put out a statement that last year they kind of looked at the top 4. If you won your conference, you kind of got that bye, and they kind of went away with that this year. They said they're going to kind of look at the teams, they're going to judge them on however they're judging them, the eye test, strength of schedule, who they play, who they won, who they beat, all those seasons, and that will determine the top 4 teams that goes into when it goes into the playoffs. So you could have. Ohio State could get to that Big Ten championship game and beat Indiana. I'm not going to start talking crazy on here. Beat Indiana, because then Indiana still turns around and remains a top 4 team and get a bye week going into the playoffs. So it's just interesting. I don't know. I feel like if I'm picking a team, I feel like it's in a very good spot and has a lot of a little bit to gain. Here is Utah, right? Utah has 2 losses. In the Big 12, and they still kind of got a lot of things in front of them. They're sitting currently at the 13th spot, and we know it's 12 teams in the playoff, but you always got to account for that one team kind of sliding in that's not in the Power Four conference. Which, by the way, none of those teams made the rankings, but right now you assume is Memphis that would get that spot. But I feel like Utah's in a spot here if they could win out, have a really strong resume, and maybe nick out one of those SEC teams with 2-3 losses or something like that, and kind of still a spot in here. They're playing with. That's another team that's really like clicking right now and improving, and you see that play on the field when you look at the Utes out there.
Yeah, and I think a good spot to be in if you're not going to be the top team, number 1 overall seed. I think a good spot to end up in is that fifth seed that Ohio State was last year, especially this year. You may end up playing, you know, Memphis over there, right? You may have to play somebody like that, and then that first week and at home, right? You may get a home game versus a team that just really isn't on the same level, the same caliber. Can't really travel that well in terms of fans, and that gets you ramped up and ready for the next week, right? And you still don't have to play against the number 1 overall seed in week 2. So it's gonna be interesting how that shakes out. Right now, Georgia's kind of in that spot right now. I expect another shuffling of the deck, but whoever gets that position gets a great home game for the fans, and then gets to potentially continue on the playoffs with an opportunity to compete for a championship.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously, it's still early in November. November is gonna feel like a long month when it comes to
It
football.
is.
Just gonna be a lot of games, a lot of shuffling, a lot of big games taking place. So it's a lot of football left to be played, and we'll continue to kind of monitor things, see how things shake out, and then get ready to combat that SEC push that is going to come here early December when they start talking about strength of schedule in the big bad SEC. But I don't know, man. So far, I think tough job. I think they did a good job with this initial outing of things, and we'll see how things shake up and bring you guys that information when we have it. So please follow us here on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. We continue to bring you Ohio State news or news around college football. As always, Chim, we're going to put our stamp on this for the nice OH.
All right, yo.
Go Bucks.
Go Bucks. Number 1 team in the nation.
Number 1.